Okay, if everyone can have a seat, we're going to get started. We'd like to welcome everyone to the 38th annual CALLERLAB convention here in Las Vegas. My name is Ken Ritucci, and I am from West Springfield, Massachusetts. And the panelist and main speaker today will be Mr. Don Beck from Massachusetts. Now lives on Martha's Vineyard. And we're here to talk about and show you a system that really isn't widely used as far as I can see. I know it's been a passion of Don's. He wrote the book called Out of Sight in 1983. And we will also remind you that this session is being taped. So if and when you have questions, see Scott up front. He will hand you the microphone. We want to make sure we get your questions on tape. It's a system that Don has used throughout his calling career. And at some point in time, I know in the New England area, coming from New England myself, it did get some play and some exposure. And I was thrilled and happy to see that Don was sort of making a comeback, not only just with this, but also with calling. He was one of our premier callers, and I still consider him one in the New England area. And he and his wife went away, and they bought a business out on Martha's Vineyard, and we sort of lost touch of Don. And I would get asked several times, "Have you seen Don? Have you seen Don?" I go, "Don's around and well and alive, and he's doing his thing, but he's sort of making a comeback. He's getting some dates for some groups again, and it's really good to see on a personal note. But I was thrilled to see that he, CALLERLAB wanted to have him do a presentation on mental image. And I'm going to be turning this over to Don in a minute, but when we think of mental image, thoughts might come to your mind of following one dancer in your mind, maybe following two, maybe just following, say, the number one man or the number one lady, following somebody in your mind. Some people might even say that sight calling in some way is a form of mental imagery because you're looking at someone, but also at the same time, in your mind, you're following that person around the square. But Don has written this book, which I believe is going to be back in print at some point.
Oh, sure.
Of course, we've been hearing that, and we certainly hope it will. It's an outstanding book that he wrote in 1983. I don't believe it's available anymore. It's out of print. And without further ado, to give you an oversight of what the mental image system is, system maybe some of you are already using, or you might use some of that you don't even know what you're using, is Mr. Don Beck.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, guys. A couple of comments first about Ken's introductions. As far as making a comeback, that's interesting. But when I moved to the island of Martha's Vineyard about 14 years ago, my calling went from 4 or 5 nights a week to 3 or 4 times a year. And I miss it, but I still can call mentally and with my own dancers. I don't need the rest of you guys. But actually, that is one of the advantages, one of many advantages of knowing the system is you can practice without real dancers there. I actually wrote an outline because I couldn't find the outline I gave. Mental image choreography. Well, first of all, when I started to learn choreography, to learn to call, nobody ever told me that there were different ways of calling choreography, different ways of doing things. I thought it was, there was one set way, and I didn't have any idea. And it wasn't until much later that I got into realizing that there's memory and modules and sight and all this other stuff. First of all, let me make a point about Scott's job here. As far as questions, if you have questions, you're welcome to interrupt. I've got one of 3 answers for you. I have no idea, or I'll give you the answer, or I'll put that off because it's part of the presentation later and it'd be premature to tell you right now. So if you do have, feel free to ask if you don't mind me shooting you down. But not now, not now. I guess you all know that there's lots of ways of calling. One is reading material. One is memorizing material, or we used to call reading off the inside of your eyelids. One is modules, or zeros, equivalents, and setups and get-outs. And in the hierarchy of what's more flexible and such, there's mental image, and then there's sight. There's also crams, which has been crammed into the hierarchy somewhere for the last few years. And I haven't been able to quite put my arms around what it is and what have you, other than extended modules. But we're not going to get into that, so don't ask any questions about it. So anyway, when I started calling, I found out reading didn't work because I was looking here and not at the dancers, and I started to explore more, and I ran into a gentleman by the name of Jay King, whom I was very fortunate to know personally. We both worked at the same branch of Raytheon, and I used to go up and bug him for about an hour each, for an hour once a week, and we'd chat about this, that, and the other. And he talked me into buying his book, Fundamentals of Calling, which was later called Fundamentals of Hash Calling, and then when he passed away, when he was 56, an untimely passing, Gene Trimmer bought the rights to it and updated it a little bit and sold it under the same name. Can I ask you not to talk there or sit there, because I'm going to be using this whiteboard an awful lot, unless you want help. And furthermore, you're not the only one that's moved out of that seat. Scott was first. And so I bought Jay's book, and I said, this must be the way. I didn't know about sight or anything. And I started reading it, and I'd read a little more, and the next week I'd go up and say, I got to this, and I got to this, and this is cool. He says, well, that's not exactly what I had in mind, but if it works for you, go for it. And I'd go through a little bit more and extend it a little more, and then I'd say, wow, what about this? And he said, well, that's not exactly what I had in mind, but if it works for you, let's go for it. And it took me quite a few years to realize that Jay King's system that I was using was actually my system. But it has been, I've seen others. Jay got it from somebody named Dick Tilley, who used to be in the New England area, and there are others, and they have developed parallel systems and what have you. I know that Ron Schneider, I got some stuff from him, and I'll mention about that later. Before I get into the next part, I want to apologize to the people that aren't here, but it's your fault for not being here. Namely, the people that are listening to the recording of this. Quite a bit of this is going to be visual, and it will be difficult for you to see what's going on, and it's difficult for me to verbally explain it. So I do have handouts that I'm going to give out afterwards. I don't want you guys reading ahead and getting confused. The handouts are available via email from me. If your tape people want to call, just email to Don Beck at donbeck.org. And if you didn't get that the first time, replay the tape. I'm not here to try and sell the book.
I am.
Unfortunately, I ran out of copies about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I'm very close to getting a second printing out, not in the same physical form, but hopefully that'll do it. What I'm here to do today is, 1, prove to you that there is a system that works. 2, give you some basics of how it works, and maybe enough so you can use some basic principles of it. And 3, hopefully get you interested enough so that you want to try learning a little bit more on your own. And right now, buy the book. But there are other people using it too. Originally, Dave Prescott from Germany was going to be presenting with me. Dave couldn't make it here, but he uses a system very, very similar, and I think based on what he read on my book many years ago. Yes? Anyway, the first thing I would do is introduce you to some friends of mine. If I can figure out how they go here. I'm putting square dance dolls on a magnetic board and trying to get them so they're squaring their sets, which is the hardest part for them here. What I want you to notice on the figures that I use, the characters I use, these are not arrows pointing in the direction that they're facing. Can you all see most of that? This is a big white board up here. These are not arrows that they're facing in the facing direction. These are arms. Consider them as arms. And when a couple is holding hands like this couple is, it's a normal couple. When they're not holding hands, it's a half-sashayed couple. Makes it a little easier to see. These are my friends. They've been through a lot with me. And first thing I want to do, well, I want to dispel the rumor that in order to follow a square mentally, you have to follow the whole square mentally. I think one or two people that can do that. I sure can't. And I don't expect you to. I've tried to break this down to a system that anybody can use. It takes a bit of work to learn it fully, but once you put the work in, it makes it really easy to use. And so you don't have to follow all 8 people. You don't have to follow 4 of the people, like a site caller does. You don't have to follow 2, a partner in a corner. You only have to follow 1 person. But you have to follow a few other things at the same time. But they don't change as oftenly and don't as the dancer's positioned in the formation with every square. So what I'm going to do right now as a start is try to prove to you that a system works. I'm going to hide the identity of everybody but the number 1 man. And I'll be using the number 1 man as the active dancer, but it really works with anybody, including the 4 women. I'm going to probably stick with him first. And I'm going to show you a sequence and then flip them over so you'll see that I can resolve it. Now, you say he's memorized the sequence. Well, no, actually, I haven't, because we haven't created it yet. Jim, Scott, I don't know if you want to. Well, no, I can do it. Jim Wass, give me a call.
Heads past the ocean.
Heads past the ocean. Okay, Jim Wass. Now, let me also say that I can't follow everything I can as a site caller. And it's much more versatile. I haven't memorized any modules or anything, but I can't follow everything. So occasionally I will say tilt and refuse to do that and go on to a simpler call. Your job is to get excited and interested, not to trick me and make me look bad. Monty, give me another call from here. Don't let him take that mic. Swing through. Right, center, straight, left. All right. Extend. Tilt. You want to try again? The girls are curvier here. Okay. Men run. Scott? You're right. Can you give me a call? You can give me pass through trade by. I'll take that. We know that's a call. Pass through trade by. Pass through. Oh, we're still trading by here. Okay. Another call? Touch a quarter works for me. 1 or 2 more. Walk and dodge. Walkers walk and dodgers dodge. All right. So I say I haven't called you for a while. Can you give me another one? I can, but not from here. Yeah. Okay. Bend the line. I'd rather stay in these columns for now. I don't feel like working that hard. Tag the line. I can handle tag the line. You want it in, out, left, right, in. Let me. You got a good one. Let me resolve from here.
I do my X's and O's.
Yep.
Sometimes when there's multiple
Yeah.
where you're at.
As a matter of fact, I forgot there's one uncanceled. Okay, let me resolve from here. Touch a quarter, men run. We have an 8 chain through formation. Let's see, what should we do here? Veer left. Ladies trade. Does that feel better? Ferris wheel. They get into there. They get into there. They go over here. They go here. We have a double pass-through formation. Center square through 3/4. And at this point, I can call all man left. Now, at this point, we should have a drum roll, and I should hope that I did it right. Generally, I do. I gave this presentation once here at CALLERLAB to the caller coaches, and I got it wrong. Not a good way to start. I regained their confidence at the end of the hour, but it was a little tough. Theoretically, this should be the number 1 man's corner, number 4 lady. Hallelujah. This should be her partner. Did everybody memorize that sequence? This should be the number 2 couple. This should be number 1 lady. Hallelujah. Number 3 man and number 3 girl. There. That was the scary part. Are there any questions at this time? Well, the question from the audience in about 3 places is, how did you do that? I was doing this presentation in Oklahoma many years ago, and when I said any questions at this point, there was one elderly gentleman in the back who said, "How'd you do that?" Everybody else was quiet, and then when he said that, they broke out laughing, but it turned out another long story we won't get into, but a conflict he'd had with somebody else, and nobody else had been able to prove to him, as I did by randomly creating this thing, that it works. So how did we do it? The first thing we're going to do, somebody just said something that reminded me something I wanted to say. Maybe it'll come again. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to square your set. I'm going to lay on 1,001 restrictions. And then we'll peel them off one by one at a time. And depending on how much time we have, that's just how many the restrictions we'll take away. We'll leave time for Q&A after, too. So let's follow the number 1 man. The first restriction is, well, first of all, when you're doing mental image, you can't only follow the number 1 man. You have to follow everybody, not their identities, but you have to know what the formation is. And you have to know that whether you're calling modules or site or what have you. Let's just check this out. If I call head square through, what's my formation? 8 chain through is the word. I'm repeating that for the, I can't say for the tape because they don't do it on tape anymore. For the bits, yeah. You bits that didn't come. So we're an 8 chain through setup. I do right and left through. What's my formation? Veer left. Couple circulate. Bend the line. Right and left through. So the formation changes sort of every time, but it doesn't change as much as the other stuff. So you all have that. Now, the next thing I have to do is follow this active man in that formation. Heads half square through. We have an 8 chain through formation, and he is on the inside facing out on the right side of the square. Swing through, we have parallel waves, ladies on the end, and he's on the near end on the right side of the square, etc. I think you can appreciate that that's something you can follow in your heads and probably do without thinking about it. Okay, so let's get into the techniques. Got a question, Michael? Scott, got a microphone? Could be. I don't know.
You can use this one, Michael.
I was asking, do you care where on the floor he is, or just that he's a center facing out in right-hand waves? I mean,
I care where on the floor. I mean, I care where the overall formation is and where he is in that formation. Okay. So the first restriction, let's just dance these numbered head couples in the middle, not touch these side couples at all, and just dance the head couples in the middle. And let's call touch a quarter, walk and dodge, partner trade, spin the top. I thought this board was going to be big enough, but here we go. Spin the top, single hinge, and the women turn back. Now, I've got this guy where he was for an Allemande left before, standing on this spot. What do I know about the squares? I know this is the number 4 couple where they're supposed to be because I didn't touch them. Ta-da, I wasn't even worried that time. Same with the number 2 couple. I know this is the number 3 man. 1 because of symmetry with the number 1, and 1 because he's the only one left. Thank you. What I don't know is whether this is the number 1 lady or the number 3 lady. And in fact, I don't know that because I wasn't using the system this time. It can be either 1 or 3. And as you all know, when you guess and there's a 50-50 chance of getting it right, there's a 70-30 chance of getting it wrong. This time we got it wrong. No, we got it right. All right. I can't tell. I didn't keep track of it, but can either Scott pass them out or pass out these? So I'm passing out a list of calls now. Oh, actually, could I have one of those? Interesting. You don't have to look at them quite yet, but down the left side of this, there's a list of calls called O-type calls. And we're going to do this same sequence again, same restrictions, but add one more restriction. You're only going to use O-type calls from the left-hand lane, left-hand column. As some of, you know, at this point, trust me, only use those calls. When you eventually get the handout with the summary and everything else, it'll have this list repeated, but have some A1 calls on there also. So just look at the left-hand column right now, A1 and A2. I'm going to do another sequence in the middle, but limit myself to the O-type calls, the left-hand column. Head square through, partner trade, partner trade. Not touch a quarter. It's not on that list. What can we do from here? Veer left, wheel and deal, square through 3/4, partner trade. And I'm ready to resolve. I'm going to dance this active man out back to the spot where he was before. Pass through. And because, well, first of all, we know these guys are still number 4. We know these are still number 2. We know we have number 3 here. But because I restricted myself to calls from that O-type list, this is the number 1 lady. Duh. And the number 3. So right now, you guys, if you could had that list of O-type calls in front of you, you could call mental image. It's not and by mental image, it's total freewheeling within the restrictions we have, but you haven't memorized a sequence, and you haven't had to follow anything but the formation, the arrangement, and where the active guy was. Now, I would like to be using these up here, but when I tried it, the whole tripod fell over. We'll see if we can do it. So what I like to think of the square right now is sort of a grid that's an 8-chain through formation type of grid. And I'm doing the dancing and eventually dancing the active guy, the number 1 man, to that spot. You know, if I were following the number 3, it'd be to that spot, etc. But let's just stick with this for a while. So, you say, fine, I'm impressed, but that's kind of a lot of restrictions. So, let's venture a little bit further. If I do something that's on the X-type list, head ladies chain, I think we can see that if we did something the same as we did before and brought the man to this spot, the ladies would be in the wrong place because we put them in the wrong place. So, from now on, whenever I want to call head ladies chain, I'll just call head ladies chain again, and that'll bring them right back and everything will work. That's lifted a restriction a tiny bit. Let's call flutter wheel instead of head ladies chain. Well, actually, there's something that I think is kind of cool. We've got them back home right now. If I call head ladies chain, first of all, let's call head ladies chain. Do a few calls before we call the head ladies chain again, like right and left through. And now call head ladies chain again. It still brings the number 1 lady back to me. So it's still going to work. So I can cancel that first head ladies chain, or the ill effect of it, with another one, but it doesn't have to be immediately. Now, let's take it a step further. I'm going to do a star through, and now I'm going to do ladies chain. And then I'm going to cancel the effect of that ladies chain. And interestingly enough, instead of bringing the number 1 lady back to me, I'm bringing the number 3 lady back to me. But I don't care. Because it's still, when I pass through, I've got my number 1 lady where she belongs. All I care about is the number 1 man, where he is, and that I've done 2 or 4 or 6 ladies chains. Now, what I don't want anybody to do is say, call a big sequence and then say, did I call 15 or 16 ladies chains? I think it was 16, so it was an even number, so I'm all set. What you do is, I call the ladies chain, I canceled it. I call the ladies chain and it won't resolve, I canceled it. I'm all set and can call others again. All right, let's go back. Just want to make sure we got these people right. They say they have trouble squaring their sets. Let's do, instead of a ladies chain, let's do a flutter wheel, okay, which is exchanging the men. Again, is there anybody that's not clear on the fact that if I brought this guy with a half square through over to the spot, he's going to have the wrong woman because we've switched women? If I do another flutter wheel and then bring him to his spot, we've canceled the effect of the first flutter wheel. It should work. Now, the next part that's fun is I can do a ladies chain. We have a condition that will not resolve. Then we're going to, let's do a star through for variety. And we'll do a flutter wheel. So we're canceling a ladies chain with a flutter wheel. So as long as I cancel the effect of that, it doesn't have to be with the same call. Pass through, Alaman left. So it works out that if you look in the right-hand column, there's X-type calls, and then there's another X-type calls. You call any one of those X-type calls on either of those 2 lists. I'll tell you later why I've broken it up that way. Any one of those will cancel the effect of any other one. So as long as I call, whenever I call one of those X-type calls, I cancel it with another of those X-type calls and bring the guy to this spot, my Alaman left will work. Let's try a sequence. Second row, give me a call. head slide through, okay? And you're welcome to use X's or O's as long as we cancel them. Touch a quarter. That is an X-type call, so we have to be aware that we have an uncanceled X. Center's walk and dodge. That's an O-type call, so we still have an uncanceled X. What do you call? Partner trade. Okay. Now, I'm disregarding body flow, hand availability, the whole thing. The quickest way to get to the corner from here with a call that is an X-type call that will cancel the touch a quarter is lead left. So let's do a lead left. And theoretically, this should be the number one lady. So far, so good? Then just pause briefly. How many of you guys are site callers? How many of you also use modules? How many use modules as a basic? As your main tool? How many of you actually use mental image? We just had one when he walked out the door. Ken does. We have a few that do. How many use crayons? I'm just curious. Okay. So, let's see. Oh, what I was going to say much earlier, the reason I went into this instead of site calling is because I didn't know any better. This is all I knew. And it wasn't until later that I knew there were different things. And I went with mental image for a long, long time. I eventually forced myself into going with site because there were limitations, and found that site was really pretty easy to get into because I had a background of what's actually going on in the square. I had much more control than I would have otherwise going directly into it. And I was going to add another point, and I'll do that later. All right, let's take off one of those. Let's not quite yet. Michael has another question.
Do you find when, or at least people who start using your method, that you use a lot of O calls because they're easier to use, less to keep track of, that leans in that direction?
I haven't noticed that. A lot of time people use X's in pairs, swing through, men run, and that cancels them right away, and that helps.
Another question.
Yeah, just following on Michael's question, you could certainly use modules instead of the O or the X-type call. You could use an O or an X-type module. And you do that as well, Don?
Sometimes I do, but basically my thought is that well, I was at a caller school in 1970 as a student, and one of the beginner callers got up there to call his thing, and he said, heads right and left through. Oh, I blew it. Get back home. He had a memorized sequence or a module or something, and he said the wrong call. And occasionally, the wrong call might pop out. But if you're awake and are listening to that call with mental image, it's not a prepared sequence. You're ad-libbing, and you can go from there.
Many of them still do that.
I felt pretty good. I guess I got into my teaching early, but with him, I did take him aside and said, you know what happened when you called the right and left through? How could you have gotten back and started over without saying, oh, I made a mistake? He said, I could have called another right and left through? Yeah. And he did a much better job 2 days later. But it happens, especially when you're nervous. So, okay, my evolution is what I was trying to remember before. I went to being a site caller, and for years as I taught people how to do this system, I'd say, but I'm a site caller. And eventually I finally conceded, I use mental image still about 50% of the time. I use it pretty much for the first sequence of every tip before I've memorized who started with whom, because I had troubles memorizing. That's the hardest part of sight for me. I use it in singing calls, because when I ad-lib choreography in singing calls, I have enough troubles memorizing corners and partners for the patter sequence. and try and do a different corner every time through the singing call. I mean, I know I do the cite the first and the fourth sequence, but the second and third, it's a new corner. I use mental image there. It's a handy tool, and I'll tell you some other reasons it's handy for sight callers also. All right, so we've got a restriction of dancing just in the middle. We had a restriction of just using O's. Then we lifted that and went to X's and O's as long as we cancel the X's. I do want to point out that how do you remember to cancel the X's? I had one of my students one time come back and he said, I found out how to really, without thinking about it, cancel the X's, keep track of the X's. So every time I call an X, I put my hand up. And every time I call another X, I put it down. And if I'm in a relaxed mode like this, I can call my All Man left. If my hand's up, I know I have to do another X to do it. And I said, what do the dancers think? He said, no, I do that in the mirror while I'm practicing. But I can't remember if it was he and I or I that came up with the fact that rather than raising your hands, we just started using our fingers. Make an X, resolve. Make an X, cancel it. Make an X, cancel it. That would do it, except my pants are getting tighter all the time. Excuse me, I can't resolve yet. I can't get my hand up. but crossing the fingers is an inconspicuous way of doing it. So if I'm doing this, that I'm talking about we have an uncanceled X on the top. All right, so we've gotten rid of that restriction. By this time, numbered 4 couple and numbered 2 couple are a little bored. Hopefully you guys aren't, but if I see you falling asleep, I know you are. If you see me falling asleep, it's because I only had 2 hours sleep last night. I had poor plane connections. But, all right, so let's do a head square through. We've canceled all X's. We're over here. Now, I say we're working on the left. I'm watching the active guy. These guys are obviously doing the identical thing. No questions on that, I hope. Although there is a session going on about non-symmetric choreography, but we're going to stick to symmetric. All right. If I do a bunch of calls over here, using X's if I want, but canceling them, and dance it back to an 8-chain through formation with this guy standing on this spot, it'll still resolve. So let's do a common thing, swing through. God, I forgot how to do that. You're right, the end's turned back. That's an X. Spin the top. That doesn't fit on the board too well, but that cancels the X. Make believe they're end to end. Single hinge. That's another X. The man's on his spot. Ladies, you turn back. Now, I think I have you turn back on the O list. That refers to all 4. Everybody you turn back. If I had just a single individual turn back, that's an X. So we have an uncanceled X. Ladies turn back, and I should have a 0 box resolve. Number 4 couple, number 1 lady, etc. You got a heck of a lot of choreography there, guys. That'll take you through 3/4 of your singing calls right there. All right. Let's extend that further. Hide these guys. As I said, I'm teaching this quickly, so I don't expect you to retain it all. This will all be reviewed in the handout. But I'm trying to prove what the basics of the system are. So one of the things that you have to learn beyond what you already know is which calls are X's. And you don't look those up on the fly while you're doing it. You have to know. But there is a way, especially, I'll show you a little later, but if you work on the X's same facing direction, it sort of becomes intuitive, like ladies chain and flutter wheel, or from a wave or 2 ace line, centers trade. And then the others become intuitive after that, the change facing direction. There is an exact rule that you can take a new call and figure out whether it's an X or O. But I'm not going to talk about that now and probably not later because it tends to get confusing. For now, trust me, memorize the list. So all you've got to do is when you're learning about a new call, right and left through. Starts with two couples facing, it ends with two couples facing. The couples exchange position. We have to learn one more thing about it. It's an O. In fact, you don't even have to learn it's an O. All you have to do is learn the X's. Most of your calls are O's anyway, although this list doesn't look that way. But if you learn the O's, you learn the X's, you don't have to know the O's. You call as many of those if you want. It's only the X's that have to raise a flag and say, I've got an uncanceled X or I'm canceling it now.
You have to come up here. The
cord's not long enough.
The wireless are both on the same channel.
Would it be fair to describe X's and O's without the list by saying, let's take the men we're working with their heads. I like to call that head street, going either way, north or south, and side street. If at the completion of the call, the number one man is on the same street he started, if he started on the head, he ended on his head, and had the same partner, that's always going to be an O. And if the call had him change streets and it changed girls, that's an O.
That is the definition, but there's some trickiness as to who's the same partner. And the same partner that I use is the same partner as involved for defining the X's and O's, not the, who's your partner in an ocean wave. We're not going to get into that argument. Callers can't agree. You can't expect dancers to know who's your partner. Is it the one that you step to the wave with, or is it the one that's next to you? But the definition for defining O's, there's a very clear way of doing that, and that's necessary. But we're not going to get into that now. We were going to go out and dance on the right. That's what we're going to do. So let's do a heads half square through. And right now, I can do a right and left through, pass through, trade by, and bring the guy back to his spot, Alaman left. But I can dance these guys over here on the right. Dance, and the left will do the same. Dance the couples on the right just the way I did the ones on the left. And when I'm done, make sure all X's are canceled, and then bring them back. Somebody give me a call. Now another one. Okay, the dancers are standing here. I'm going to take both of those. Flutter wheel, that's an X. I got this headset so I didn't have to hold the mic and do this at the same time. Now I need a third hand to hold up the X's. Veer to the left, somebody said. And I'm going to resolve quickly. I got a cancel an X over here. I'm going to say ladies trade. I'm going to say, let's do a couple circulate. Bring him back to the side where his spot is. Let's do a bend the line. That's an X over here. Oh, let's not do a bend the line. We're jumping ahead. Let's just do a wheel and deal. Do a wheel and deal. And a right and left through. And he's standing on his spot. And we followed the formation. We followed the arrangement. We know where the men and women are. We followed the active guy. We're having troubles with a right and left through here. Need a fourth hand to hold the board up. He's where he's supposed to be. And because we follow these rules, everybody else is taking care of themselves. Number 2 couple, 1 lady, 3 man, 3 lady. We have 2/3, 50% more material than we had before. Any questions at this point? Okay. Let's take a big step from here. I've been working the active man in the middle. I've been working him on the left. I've been working him on the right. We've been doing X's and canceling them. So far, every time I've done an X, I've canceled it in the same location, left, middle, or right. I do an X in the middle, I have to cancel it in the middle. I do an X on the left, I have to cancel it on the left. Same on the right. Let's see what happens if we do something different. I'm going to do an X in the middle. Heads past the ocean. That's not an X. Recycle. There's my X in the middle. So I have an uncanceled X in the middle. This is a big jump, guys, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, exciting. Pass through, or veer left, veer right. He's on his spot. We know he can't do an Alaman left here because the women are incorrect. We're going to do an X on the left to cancel the one in the center. Veer left, bend the line. Bend the line as an X from two-face lines. So we've done an X in the middle, canceled it on the left. That's not what I was planning to do. Let me just show you real quickly, but we're going to get back to that. I was trying to do something else. Right now, the Alaman left is a trade by formation, and his spot's moved out here, but I'm jumping ahead. Number 1 lady, number 2 man, number 2 lady, etc. Number 4 lady. That's a bigger step than I wanted to take. Sorry. What I want to do first is do an X on the left, cancel it with one on the right. I think that's an easier to see progression. Where are these people belong? But since I'm not looking at my iPhone, I don't see my outline. All right, let's hide these guys again. We're going to do an X on the left. Heads pair off. Only if it's bouncing is disturbing you. Only if you don't want to see it because you're standing behind it. All right, I'm going to do a typical X, swing through. I'm going to cancel it. I'm not going to cancel it. I'm going to do a scoot back to get my head man facing across the center. I'm going to do an all 8 circulate that's going to bring him across. I am not, that's for sure. Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Veer right, ends turn back, scoot back. All right. Is that called a typo? Okay, I'm going to do an all 8 circulate to bring this guy across. End circulate. Center circulate. No, it's not. I guess let me jump in and say one more. Anyway, I want to say it here. Yeah. When we were doing dancing on the left and then moving to the right, dive through, pass through, what have you, whenever we do something that crosses somebody across the center, it has to fit in certain number of calls. It's got to be, first of all, it can't be just the ends or the center circulate. It has to be all 8 circulate or couple circulate. You have to bring a couple across. And second of all, it has to be your active man as part of that group that's circulating. That's a restriction for now, not for permanent. So anytime I call something that brings somebody across the center, pass through, trade by, Ferris wheel, square through 3/4. I have the bottom right hand is couple circulate, all 8 circulate, 8 chain 2. It's a list of things across the center. When somebody goes across the center, you're supposed to raise a flag and say, was my active man going across the center? Cool, he was. We're all set. If my active man wasn't going across the center, like would have been the case before I did the scoot back, then I know the inactive man was going across. I don't want to happen. So basically I do something quick like right and left through, pass through, trade by, and bring them back to this side and continue on. But for the time being, when you call an across the center type move, make sure your active man is facing across because he's got to be the one going across. That's why I did the scoot back. Okay, so we now have the active guy across. We have an X on the left, uncanceled. On the right, nothing's happened yet. Let me just do a recycle. That's a quick X. We're back to an 8-chain through formation. And this part of the talk, I just haven't got the real wow how to say it, but let's just look what we have. Men are still in sequence. Women are still in sequence. Men have their partners, on the outside men have their partners, inside men have their corners, their opposites, their partners behind them. And men being in sequence means that we're facing corners and we can do an element left. So what I've done is by doing an X on the left plus an X on the right, this is fairly small writing, I've moved the spot from here to here. I can do all sorts of dancing. I can cancel X's here and then leave one uncanceled and go over to here, do a bunch more dancing, leave one uncanceled, and I know the spot moves over to here. Then I just dance the guy to this spot in 8-chain through formation instead of this one. And you know what? That's going to add variety to your calling. Because, believe it or not, we're stuck following an active guy all the time. And we're used to dancing him to a center position. And if you just do moves that will bring him to the outside position, that's going to feel different to the dancers because you don't do that often enough. So you've added variety, whether you like it or not, and added a lot of possibilities. And that's an X on the left followed by an X on the right. Now, go back and square your sets. She was ready for a break. Anybody else ready? As I told Ken, he said, I'm going to do a brief intro and then you're going to talk. And I said, I've got about 3 or 4 or 5 hours worth of stuff. Let me know 10 minutes before the end of the session and we'll say that's as many restrictions as we can remove today. But, whoops, number one man. So it works out. Let me just repeat that rule. Dance the guy, canceling X's in the center, bring him to the left, do an X. Bring him over to the right, do an X, cancel that X. Bring him back to his spot over here. And, no, his spot has moved to over here, and you're okay. And you can do your element left on this new spot. Now, interestingly enough, if I do an X on the right and then on the left, it has the same property of moving this spot from here to here. So, but there's something that doesn't quite feel natural about it. You'll see. Let's do heads past the ocean and extend. So heads past the ocean is one of these. Extend is one of those. So X's are canceled. I brought the guy to the right. Recycle. I've done an X on the right. Pass through. Let's do an 8-chain too. Same thing. Pass through trade by. Bringing the guy across. Trade by. Now let's do an X on this side. Veer left and bend the line. Bend the line is the X part. So I've done an X on the right, and I canceled it with one on the left. That moves the spot from here to here. That means I have to bring this guy way back to the right side to get him on his spot to cancel. The spot's still there, but you have to remember, before he was right there with his spot. This time he's on the wrong side for his spot. But his spot has moved 2 places to over here. You still have to bring him over there. So let's do a... I was going to say barge through, right?
That was a fun call. Barge through.
Square through 2. Trade by. Okay, so we got him back on the right side, the same side as the spot. How do we get him onto his spot? I heard a right and left through. That's the quickest way. If you're left, wheel and deal, et cetera, et cetera. Let's do that and confirm that we're there. These guys didn't fall on the floor too often. We should be. So this is, his partner should be here. His corner should be here. Her partner should be here, et cetera. Question, Scott. Do you understand why I don't need dancers? Both Scott and Ken were wondering why I wasn't going to use dancers. I tried it with dancers, but turning them upside down so you can't see who they are just doesn't work. Keith?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And say where you're from for the tape as well. Thank you.
Keith Ferguson, Saratoga, California. Earlier, when at the very beginning, we had us giving calls, you called a tilt on an extend.
Yeah.
Now, I think at that time you did have the wave in the center with the men in the middle. Is that the reason it was a tilt, or can you handle?
No, it's because I had an uncanceled X in the middle, and I had a half sashayed wave, and I had two women together.
Well, then the question would be, can you handle cases where you say you had the heads pass the ocean and swing to maybe cancel the X or whatever you need to do, but where it's half sashayed?
If I did, I can't handle it too easily in the system, but what I can very easily do is sort of make up for it. If I do a heads past the ocean swing through, extend, I can call a swing through centers run Ferris wheel, and now I'm back in the middle, cancel that X back here in the middle, and I've straightened out the sex problem, etc. But generally when you call this, if you pre-plan where you're going, not in advance, but as on the fly as you're going, you can follow it pretty easily. If you try to follow somebody else doing it, like I was initially, it's pretty tough. Because I don't know, when I'm going and dancing here, I know I'm going to do an X here, and I'm going to go over here and cancel it. Or I know I've left one behind. But if you're calling, I don't know if you're going to cancel it here before going over there, or if you're planning to cancel it over there, and that's more variables to keep track of. Any questions at this point? How are we doing, Tom?
Of course, I may be getting ahead of where you want to go, but in your book you start out with the progression going from where it is now, where it is in the standard position. Let's call it number 2 in the column,
okay.
And you move it to number 3 in the column,
okay,
rather than to 4 in the column. So your book progression goes from
the sequence I chose to do it
right
25 years ago. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I think it's a little closer this way now, but we'll get into the center left.
Okay.
As we just did.
Well, the reason I like that is because now I can move from here to here, and then from here to here.
Well,
you see where I'm going?
Yeah. Everything. There are a whole bunch of individual rules, and what's really cool is if we get far enough, you'll see that we can generalize them, so there are really very few rules. For instance, one generalization, I've been using the terminology moves at 2 spots. There is eventually going to be a spot here and here, and eventually, because J. King did, we're going to call them 1, 2, 3, and 4 spot. If I call an X on one side, either side, and cancel it on the other side, either here and here, and then here and there, it's going to move your spot 2 places. It's going to move, we've been moving it from here to here. If it were here, it would move it back here. And eventually when you see here, it's going to move it to here, and this will move it back to here. But don't think about that yet. All right, let's do what I got ahead of myself with before of moving this, doing an X in the middle and on the left, and moving to that trade by position. Flip identities. Heads. Lead left. I'm being tired here. Heads lead left. I've done an X in the middle. I think my mic is slipping here. We're going to cancel it with one on the left. Veer left and bend the line. The veer left is an O. The bend the line is an X. We've done an X in the middle and one on the left. And let's just, for the heck of it, quarter out here and flip the identities and see what we looked at before. Everybody's back to back with their partner. Whoops, put the number one man the wrong way. And either facing their corner or side by side on the outside. We have a regular trade by formation type of situation. So if I do any X's and leave an uncanceled X in the middle, cancel it on the left, I've moved my spot one place to the left, and my resolve is a trade by position instead of a square. I'm going to tell you how this relates to everyday life in a second, but let's just dance this typical sequence. Heads past the ocean, recycle, pass through. We've done an X in the middle, we're on the outside, on the left. Swing through, men run, bend the line. Swing through, men run is an X, canceled. Bend the line is an X, canceling the center one. See, I'm planning ahead like that, but you could have done it the other way. You could have said the swing through was the first one, the men run, bend the line. We're here doing 8-chain 1, Alaman left. Let's everybody quarter back in where they were a second ago. Do you notice anything about this? You have a zero line. Right, exactly. If we, our old standby get-outs from zero lines, star through, square through, three-quarters. Star through, square through, three-quarters. He's standing on that spot. Darn, the thing we know already really does work. Right and left through and cross trail through. Right and left through and half sachet and slide through. A lot of your standard, any of your standard zero lines will work from there. Your standard zero line get-outs. So if you are using a lot of module kind of stuff, you could do an X in the middle and X on the left, and then just concentrate on the end guy, assume he's your active guy, dance him any way you want, canceling X's in whatever location, till you get to this trade by position with him here. That's not what I meant to say. Yeah. Well, you can do it either way. You can create a zero line any way you want, and then take the ad lib, the mental image from there, and use them to that spot. Or you can dance with the X in the middle and on the left to get the zero line, and then use your zero line get-outs. What's another common way we get into the zero line? Okay, there's one. What I was thinking of is promenade, heads wheel around. That gives us zero lines. Once your heads promenade, don't slow down, head couples wheel around. At that point, focus on one of the end men. I don't care which one. He's your active man. To get him to his Alaman 4 spot, dance whatever you have to do to get a trade by position with him on that spot facing out. Let me extend it another segment just to show you what can be done. If I get him to this spot and dance him around any way I want, but have him face the opposite direction from where he was, I can resolve to a right and left grand. Any spot I get set up with X's canceled and dance the active guy to that spot, but have him facing the other direction, there's a grand right and left. So you can create your grand right and left without an Alaman left choreography that way, easily. I suspect at this point we're going at a rate that it's hard to remember all these things, but let me, just to squeeze in a few more things. If I do an X in the middle and then on the right, I move the spot one position to the right. And so I'd have a trade by position with the guy here. Example, heads past the ocean, centers trade, there's my X. Extend, recycle, cancel the X on the right. He's out here in 8-chain through setup, pass through to a trade by setup to this spot, you got an Alaman left. Mike, are you following that? Okay. Your expression wasn't. No, he was doing that before. So let me just show you some generalizations. An X, this is, don't try to remember this. Don't do it this way. What is it? I'm a professional. Don't you try this at home. If I do an X on one side and the other, either sequence, it moves the spot 2 places. And that includes moving these either this way or that way. If I do an X in adjacent locations, center and left, it moves it 1 spot left. Center and right moves it 1 spot right. But also if I do it right and left, adjacent locations, it moves it 1 position in the direction of the movement of the spot of the, the X's were left to right, so the spot moves left to right, either from here to here, here to here, here to here. And if you follow it further, it moves it from here back to here, and there are phantom X's and all sorts of other stuff we're not going to get into. We have removed a whole bunch of limits at this point, a whole bunch of restrictions. You've got a whole bunch of choreography you can do here that can be ad-lib. Now, you're going to get in the rut and do the stuff you know anyway. Swing through, men run. Oh, I know that works. But you have the opportunity to go beyond that. One of the big restrictions we haven't removed yet is changing from horizontal columns to vertical columns. And there are two different types of ways to do that, through the middle calls and around the outside calls. And I'm not going to get into that now, but there are rules to follow where the spot goes when you do that. We talked about if somebody goes across the center, it has to be the active man. Otherwise, it's an internal tilt. In fact, if you have somebody go across the center and it's not your active man, your spot is moving over here. Say it's the number 3 spot facing west, it'll move to the number 1, 2, 3, 4, number 3 spot facing that way. Let me just give you a quick example of that. Heads right and left through, pass through, or heads square through, pass through, trade by. Somebody's going across the center, but it's not the active guy. He's over here. If it's not the active guy, his spot's going across. So now I can do a veer left, Ferris wheel, square through 3/4 to the corner. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Some of the advantages, some of the interesting stuff. And some of the people that have read the book have said, I don't plan to use this, but man, it's really exciting to see that there are actually rules that govern the stuff I've been using all the time anyway. It's nice to see that the puzzle pieces fall in place. Some people follow sequence. I don't have to. It works out. But interestingly enough, I'm going to draw a line across here, left to right across the middle of the square. If my spot is any one of these 4 things, if my active man is on the same side of this line as the spot is, then the men are in sequence. If the man is on this side, the men are out of sequence. If all X's are canceled, the women are also in sequence or out of sequence. If X's are not canceled, the women are one way and the guys are the other. Quick way to look at that. Some people need to know that. One of the methods I was reading about before I got into this was a method of following sequence. And I don't know if you realize it, but right and left through always changes sequence. Whether it's lines, A chain through, centers, square. My right and left through up here, the active guy is crossing the line. Right and left over here, the active guy is crossing the line. Right and left through from lines, the active guy is crossing the line. But star through sometimes changes sequence and sometimes doesn't. If I do a star through from squared set, he's crossing the line. If I do another star through, he doesn't cross the line. How do you know? Which one, when can I use star through and when can't I? Sequence was just too much. You'll find out pretty much once an X, always an X. Now, there's some exceptions, and that's something like fan the top, it's an X from waves. If it starts from two-phase lines, it's not an X. But the exceptions are the starting different. You have to consider fan the top from two-phase line is a call. Fan the top from ocean wave is a different call. Same with U-turn back. Everybody U-turn back is one call. Just the women turn back is a different call, or the ends turn back. Scott? Bend the line from two-phase lines works here. From single-facing lines has the effect of changing east-west facing to north-south, and we're not getting into that now, but yeah. Right, but it's a different starting formation. It does have that effect. There was another...
We have 5 minutes.
Okay. Here's something that site callers might relate to. Have you ever gotten to the point where you want to resolve, and you've got the guy's corner over on this side of the square, and he's over here, and you call pass-through trade by, and he's over here, but she's shot to the other side? Or you do something else and bring him back, and she goes over to here? If you know your X's, you can solve that problem. Call an X, any X, and she'll wait for you.
Are you talking about dancing X's? Question.
One of the callers I taught this to, a good friend of mine, although he's dropped out of calling, you're saying, X's, they don't even stay there if they're supposed to. And I'm not thinking of the form of X you're talking about, but he said, have you ever had one of those days? Have you ever had one of those days I call circle left and they get out of sequence? Got a question?
Question.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that over the years have taught callers, like 7 different full 6-month sessions. And by the way, I exclusively call your system, and I'd love to chat with you after for a second at least. But
sure.
There's
Except
two things
I have another session
for the guys who have never done this before. This is brand new, because I've taught it to callers who are brand new. And in my caller schools, I taught, okay, we're going to do mental image, we're going to do sight. I allow everything except reading. You're not allowed to read. It screws up your timing, and you can't entertain the crowd. And the one thing I tell you for the guys that want to try this, never know, it really works really well if you combine your X's. Because I'm telling you, when you're new at it, you'll forget that you didn't unresolve. As in the
I generally say, cancel your X as soon as possible.
And there's a
until
bunch
you're
of calls
comfortable with it, and then you can spread
like
that out as
in ocean
further.
waves. And I know you've done this just site calling, but think about it. In ocean wave, if you say ladies trade recycle, you've really done a zero with 2 X's. So if you do them right away, touch quarter walk and dodge, or just put them in groups of 2.
One of the places this doesn't work, but you create little modules that do, is with diamonds.
Right, exactly.
Diamonds don't follow the rules right, but you can create little sequences.
The other thing
that are
beginners
either
have
an X
trouble
or
with
no.
all the time is you do this for the heads. Say, well, I get this thing down. Well, you can't say heads every single time, right? You got to call sides. No, you can actually call the heads for an entire dance. I stand like this and say heads, touch quarter walk and dodge, swing through boys run, and then I go
John, do you want
sides,
to give
square through 4, and
it really happened for maybe 2 or 3 years. When I'd call the heads, I'd be standing this way. When I call the sides, I'd be standing this way. And eventually you can do that mentally too. But, this guy's spot is over here, etc. Other advantages. Somebody asked, do we have half a minute?
You have about 3-4 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody asked about coordinate. Coordinate's an interesting call. And I can use it as mental. Oh, I know what I was going to do before that. Let's do that, though. This other thing is important. Let's do a half square, heads half square through. I'm bringing, over here. Star through and right and left through. And right and left through, yeah. They didn't dance that last part. So if I, from here, call touch a quarter coordinate, and from here being with the active man on the left end of a line, either here or here. It's going to have an interesting effect. Geez, I don't know if they know how to do this, or if I still do. Circulate once and a half. 3-pair trade. Ends move up. So my active guy is over here. He's over here. Yeah. Oh, I didn't trade them. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. That does make a difference. The net effect of a coordinate is to do an X in the middle. So if I want to bring this guy to this spot, I can do a Ferris wheel. I want to cancel the X in the middle. I'm going to do a sweep a quarter. Half left, square through, LMN left. And it should work out if you guys corrected me correctly. Yeah. So coordinate does an X in the middle, even though you're working on the outside and stuff. It's kind of weird. But it does that, and you can either do an X there first and then cancel it with the coordinate and move your spot, or you can cancel it after. One really quick thing, but it's important. How many of you guys use technical zeros when you're using modules? Okay. A few of you are using technical zeros. I know people sometimes are afraid to use technical zeros because they know sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And I'm afraid, again, it's the 50, 50, 70, 30 rule. If I use a technical zero at the wrong time, it's not going to work most of the time. And when you're doing mental image, you can use a technical zero freely by saying, as long as all X's are canceled, my technical zero works. If I have an uncanceled X, the technical zero won't work. So as long as I get to a point, head square through, step to a wave, I know where I am. I could step back and rear back and out, change hands, LMN left. I can call a spin chain in the gears here. Is it spin chain in the gears? It's a technical zero? I think so. Relay the deuce is a true zero, rotates in the square, but spin chain in the gears is a technical zero. If X's are canceled, it'll work. I'll still continue from there. If I had done a ladies trade first, it wouldn't.
Yeah, all the technical zeros are in sequence.
Yeah.
Don,
and there's much more, but Ken's after me.
Well, there's another group coming.
Yeah.
First of all, 30 seconds or less. Give us a quick recap.
I got 35 copies. No, actually, the first page just gives you a bunch of blurb, the first two. The second and third page basically tell you square your set, what the figures look like, keep track of the formation and the active person. Here's, cancel X's in the same location and your spot is here. Cancel X's on left and right, your spot moves 2 places and that's here. Cancel it in adjacent places, it moves 1 place and that's here. And then there's another list which includes some advanced calls for that.
Okay, my final comment is for the tape, we've had a tremendous crowd. We have standing room only. We must have almost at least 40, 45 callers or partners here in the room, and we think that's fantastic. We will all be looking to have the new Out of Sight book eventually coming out.
Yeah.
Don promises that. And how about a nice hand with Mr. Don Beck?
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the convention. Don't forget to get your hand out.
If you're interested in being notified when the book comes out, email me at donbeck@donbeck.org, and I will put you on the list of people that has been collecting that are after me to get it done.